Hello, and thanks for joining us for another episode of Mid-American Gardener. I'm your host, Tanisha Spain, and joining me in the studio today are two of our panelists who you obviously know and love. We've got Karen and Ella here in the studio, so we'll have you guys introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your specialty. Karen, we'll start with you.
Hi, I'm Karen Ruckel, and I'm an ornamental horticulturist that I garden in the Peoria area. I've been gardening probably close to 50 years. I first started out with marigolds. So
Yes.
I've progressed since then, and I love perennials, houseplants, shrubs.
All right, a generalist, right?
Yeah.
Yes, all right. Ella?
I'm Ella Maxwell, and I'm also in the Peoria area and a horticulturist. And I have a large yard, so I enjoy pretty much a little bit of everything. So trees and shrubs and perennials.
Okay. All right, we're going to jump right in because as you can see, we've got a lot of ground to cover. We've got some questions that kind of go along with some of the stuff the ladies have brought in. So Ella, we'll start with you. This is question number 71. This is an email question that came in. Mike says, I thought I'd share the results of a big garden experiment this year that worked great. Short version is I had a neighbor gather up all the leaves and bring them to me instead of sending them to the dump. Then I'd corral them all, mulch them down, and scrape back those leaves to plant some garlic in the fall, plant some onions in the spring. But for everything else, I drill through the mulch with an electric drill auger and fill with good garden soil and generous slow release fertilizer. 2 55-gallon rain barrels and soaker hoses provided supplemental water, along with some rudimentary gray water from 5-gallon buckets. Had 0 blossom end rot on tomatoes and no noticeable blight on the tomato vines. So, who needs to burn leaves was the final question there. So you are big into mulching leaves as well.
Right. And that's something that I just wanted to bring to the attention of our viewers, the benefits of the organic matter that comes from leaves that can be incorporated back into your lawn if they're mowed and mulch mowed, which I'd recommend for the entire growing season. But again, if you have some areas with an organic mulch or leaf litter where you can just add more, chopping it up really breaks it down a lot quicker. And so that's what I have here. And we found out that there's a little green stink bug in here. So this was showing some larger leaves here and then just some chopped leaves that I went and grabbed this morning from my compost pile. And I think we do have a picture of my compost pile at home. It's actually 3 different bins, and it's all made with reclaimed lumber and some T-posts. And it's like Tinker Toys. So you can take it apart. And I do what's called cold composting, where it just sits there until it really decays on its own. It takes about a full year, and then I can utilize that mulch. But I also use the grass clipping leaf matter from my mower when it's really heavy, and I put that directly in my garden. And in my other garden as well, I have just some round circles of wire, and I use those to just fill up with the leaf matter. So if you can keep your leaves, I would certainly recommend it. It's a free source of just high quality organic matter.
But make sure that they are not whole, right? Is that what you're saying? Make sure that they're kind of...
Chopped up just makes them break down quicker over the winter season.
Gotcha. But it's not bad to leave them big. It's just... Okay.
Right. They can be in the timber, of course, they're not chopped up, but on your lawn, they'd have to be chopped up.
Gotcha. Okay. Great advice. Okay, Karen, we're going to go to you. This is question 72. This is from Susan in Aurora. And we all know that Karen is the canna queen, right? Hi, everybody. Love your show. I have 2 beautiful still flowering canna lilies and an umbrella plant that were in my pond as potted marginals. Now with the temperature drop, I pulled them out and put them on my heated back porch. What is the best way to overwinter? Should I keep them in a tub, in shallow water, or cut them back? So what's your suggestion?
Well, my suggestion is those are 2 plants that are very vigorous in the pot. And I don't see them being happy next year being together still in that pot of the same size. So I would recommend going ahead and pulling out the canna and cleaning that up and storing it separately, letting it go dormant, chopping it back, forcing it into dormancy, because you've had it inside, it's still growing. You can still just force it into dormancy. I like to store mine in, Ella and I are like the baggy queens today. I like to store mine in just pet bedding. It's cheap, it's readily available, and it seems to not have as much rot when I've used something like peat moss. Sometimes once it gets wet, it stays too wet. But so I would go ahead and separate those two plants. The umbrella plant is also a very vigorous grower. You could divide it, or depending on how the size is, just leave it in that pot by itself. Yes, maybe a shallow dish of water. Watch out your umbrella palm in the winter. They always seem to get spider mites so easily. So even though they seem like they're moist all the time, it seems like they are just so quick to get spider mites. So always be checking your foliage. If you see a little light spider webbing, or like dust or sand on them, you'll want to spray with like an insecticidal soap. But I would suggest separating them, because they both just, and you know this from growing cannas, they just form so much root mass. And same for that umbrella plant. You'd be better off then to start fresh, smaller plants than in spring.
I literally, and just for one growing season, the ones that you gave me, I had them in a pot, some of them, just to kind of add a little depth. And I literally had to wrestle them out of the pot a few weeks ago. I mean, just from one season, they were in there tight. So I can imagine, having...
Yeah, then when we think about how much mass is there, they wouldn't be happy the next year with that soil mass to proportion with what plant's there.
Yes. Now, I love going to Ella to talk about cannas after Karen, because Karen is always so careful, and she washes them and she checks them throughout the winter. Ella, tell us about your cannas.
Well, all right. Really, there are two different types of cannas that I have had experience with, and the one is the taller green leaf with the red flower, the typical one. That one makes tubers that are the size of sausages. And then there's these new hybrid cannas, the Canova type cannas, and they're much more petite, but beautiful foliage and flower colors, and they're really wonderful in containers. But you can see that the tubers or rhizomes are so much smaller. So the big ones, some of those I don't even harvest, because they make so many, and I do hose them off. I let them dry in my garage, and I throw them in a paper box. And I do have a basement back room that's, close the door, it's dark, and I store them there. But I don't do that with the cannas that Karen brought. I do a little bit more,
Yes.
and I store them actually a little warmer. I do cut them back just like that. I do wash them off and everything. And it was the same way. I think we had a question about caladiums, and that's something where I like to store those, again, warmer, like dahlias. And so the pet bedding, I hadn't thought of that. That's a great idea.
See?
I didn't know you did that.
Even the experts are learning things on
Yeah.
our show. Okay, Karen, or Ella, we're back to you. We're going to talk pawpaws. This is from Yolanda. She wrote in, I just saw the program, and your master gardener, John, spoke about the pawpaw fruit. Do you know where I can purchase a pawpaw tree? I haven't had much luck with online vendors, but I'm hoping you can point me in the right direction. So what advice do you have for her?
Okay, so years ago, I did mail order for 3 grafted varieties of pawpaw, because cross-pollination is important for a good fruit set. And then I just got one of the native ones. And the native one, you can see some fruit that's formed this year that I actually ate and harvested. And I have a large grove now, because they do sucker. But what happens is they send up these rooting little trees again, but they're what's termed monoclonal. So they're the same as the parent, so they can't cross-pollinate each other. And that's where seed comes in, because the seed has been pollinated usually by flies, because the flowers are kind of dark and fetid. And so I have seed here that I harvested, and pawpaw seed is very much, I'll take a few out, very much like other nuts and things from other tree fruits and things where they need a cold period. So here's some seeds. You can see that they're moist. I'm keeping them in the refrigerator until probably about February. And then I'm going to do some of that winter sowing that we talked about before. Where can you find pawpaws? Well, there's a lot of native plant societies that are growing them from seed. You can also get a start off of, these rooting little shoots and such. And I do think that a lot of the nurseries now are very in tune to the native plant movement, and they are offering them. So,
If would you advise someone to start with a tree or by seed? What would your advice be for someone who is wanting to grow them at home?
Well, I think the best thing to do is start with a plant. It's the easiest thing to do, but also begin to find out from people where there might be pawpaws growing in a natural space that maybe you could harvest some seeds from, or just email me.
Call Ella, she'll give you some.
I'll get you set up with, I've got some pawpaws.
She's pawpaw dealer. All right, we're going back to Karen. Question 75, this is the dreaded fungus gnats. All right, here we go. Elaine writes, earlier this year, you addressed the problem of small flying insects that originated from the soil of houseplants. There was a product mentioned and even shown that looked like a sticky strip that could be tucked into the soil. Tell me more.
Oh, yeah, like you said, dreaded fungus gnats. They just seem to be so difficult. And it's great time to be talking about fungus gnats, because this is the start of the problem, is when we've brought in plants from outside. You're not quite used to watering them in the house. We're starting to have the heat on, the dry air in the house. So your house plants, the watering schedule's a little iffy. Now is the time to be making sure you're keeping your houseplants a little more on the dry side. Fungus gnats love a moist topsoil the first couple inches for laying their eggs and their larvae. So the drier you keep your houseplants, hopefully that keeps those populations down. I couldn't find the program to find out what was talked about with what chemical, but there are a couple different chemicals. The problem with the chemicals, a lot of them are drenches. I've not seen the best success with a lot of them. And then somebody like Ella and I, with cats, we tend to not use any type of chemical that we would put in the soil or anything that would be systemic in the plant, because of that backlash of just in case the cat eats it. We tend to stay away from that. So I look at other methods that don't involve the chemicals, and that is one, trying to keep the soil drier, and then also the sticky traps. You go through your house, it's like, oh my gosh, why do I have all these different types of sticky traps? And but they're varying degree of effectiveness. I like these that I got this last Christmas as a gift, a great gift, is these are in the shape of different figures. So it's a product that then you peel off, and it has a sticky part. You stick it in the pot. These, though, you just have you just hope the fungus gnats runs into them. The old ones were yellow, and they felt that they attracted them. I think white flies are more attracted to yellow. I don't know that fungus gnats, I think they're just falling into them. I've been liking a new product. It's expensive, so I think maybe you could come up with something homemade. But this one product, I'm not even sure how you pronounce it, but Zevo for flying insect, you plug in. So it's a plug-in type light that has a little blue LED light, so it doesn't generate heat, but it has the light. And then on the back side is this replaceable sticky trap. So it's really mine. You can see I've got even a lacewing that I caught in my house. I don't know how a lacewing was in the house, but there's lots of little fungus gnats in here. The one thing I will say about this, it's a lot of light pollution, because it really generates a bright blue glow in the house, but I think that's helping to attract them to this rather than a happen chance run into the sticky trap. So I think you could make something homemade with a night light or a little light that you could have, and then some of your sticky traps nearby to get the same effect, rather than, because this is expensive, and then the refills are a little bit expensive.
I've got the one, it's called Kitschy, I believe. It's a circular one, same principle. And I always set it next to the bananas because, we were dealing with the fruit flies earlier. But I like the sticky traps as well. I use those. But the problem is once they touch anything, soil or anything, you've got to, that can get kind of not pricey, but when you do have to change them often.
Well, and when you do have a cat that is curious and gets stuck to one of these, it becomes a quite a trail of destruction through the house because they just freak out and they're running all over and they've got it stuck to them and then they have the goo on the fur and yeah.
Well, one thing that I have tried is that, before you peel and stick them, you can cut them like in half or quarters. You can take a little hole punch and then you can put a little twist tie on and then you can put them, hang them into the plant itself.
Well, and some of the old styles had
sure.
a little
nice.
mounting thing that you could put
I
them
didn't get
in.
one of those in my pack. Doggone it.
Well, this was.
I like
It doesn't
that.
have a date on it, but this might be a bit older model.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
gotcha.
we probably had them for years.
Gotcha.
Here you go.
Oh, thank
Put
you.
it with your stuff.
Yay. Okay. And you guys still have tons of stuff to show. Were you finished talking about the
Yes.
fungus gnats? I didn't want to cut you off.
For the first part, yes.
Okay. Ella, we're going to go back to you for choose whatever show and tell you like.
Okay. Well, I brought in a witch hazel. This is the common witch hazel. This is Hamamillus virginiana. It's a American native. And it blooms in November. And a lot of times it blooms when the flower and the foliage are on together. And it has a yellow fall color. It's supposed to be fragrant, but mine haven't been particularly fragrant. But it's a very interesting plant, and we have a picture of it. And this is actually at Karen's
Childhood home.
childhood home. She planted it.
Wow.
And these are small ornamental, large shrubs or small trees, depending on how you prune them. But what's really neat with these, and I'm hoping that they can go through some cold temperatures, but they'll kind of curl in and then they'll be able to open up again as the weather warms. So they really have about 3 to 4 weeks of flowering time. And it's just something different. Now, all the other varieties of witch hazel are blooming after January. So some can bloom as early as the end of January, but most of them into March. And those are going to be some of the Chinese and Japanese or some of the hybrids. And then there is also another native vernal witch hazel with the spring equinox blooming. But these were actually one I planted, and they do have some with red flower forms.
Oh, I bet that's pretty too.
So there are some cultivated varieties, and of course witch hazel, it's the little stems and the leaves that have the astringent.
I was just going to ask about that.
We can use as a kind of
Cleanser.
I use it on my face.
Cleanser,
Sure.
yes.
So could you make your own
Yes,
astringent?
I did go ahead and check that out on the web, and they have 2 different recipes. One is with high proof, alcohol or
Like an Everclear or something?
or isopropyl alcohol diluted with water, or you can actually make a tea because they say that it does have some medicinal qualities. You're not to ingest large amounts of it, but you can take it for a sore throat. I did not know that.
Wow. I'd never seen one in person, just the bottle that I buy at the health food store.
Well, yeah, did you check it out?
I'm interested now, especially in the other varieties too, that different colors, and that could be really pretty in an arrangement or something.
Well,
like a winter
my
arrangement.
witch hazel this fall had outstanding clear yellow fall color. Well, the current one I have, the one I left behind, but as you can see, the flowering of that one was really good.
Beautiful. Okay, Karen, we're back to you. We've got about 6 minutes left.
Well, when we were talking about fungus gnats, I wanted to bring up the biggest culprit, I think, at this time of the year when we're getting into the holiday seasons is the poinsettia plants. I know the growers don't mean to set us up with fungus gnats, but it seems like poinsettias always bring in fungus gnats into the house. So once again, I just thought, well, let's talk about poinsettias, and if you're going to buy one, what to look for, how to get it home. So in the poinsettias, we're looking at what's really the most attractive thing are colored bracts. And then the actual blooms are in the center of the plant. And so when I'm choosing a plant, I want to see these little nubby blooms coming in the middle because that's a fresher flowering plant. A lot of times you'll see them being sold and all of these are missing or they're brown in the middle. That either means the plant is very old and so it's been around for a while, or it's been dried out and it's already sacrificed its flower buds because it dried out. So looking for a plant, also, if it's been dried out, look at the base of it. And if there's a whole bunch of dead leaves at the base, that's another sign that unfortunately who you're buying it for, and it can happen to a nursery, it can happen to a big box store, that it just didn't get proper watering. So watch for that because you don't want to buy a stressed out plant because then you're going to struggle with it. Your bracts will fade and it just doesn't last as long. Also now we're cold, we're going cold. It's going to get colder. So when you get it at the store, I would suggest if it doesn't have a sleeve around it, using the plastic bag at the store just to snug up the foliage so it doesn't get broken. I kind of dropped it coming in here today, so you get a little white, it has a white milky sap. And
Latex.
Then, yeah.
I learned that. I learned the name.
And then have one of your reusable shopping bags because
idea.
this then pop your little poinsettia or your big poinsettia in or put it over the top to give another layer of protection from going from the store. 20 degrees is pretty injurious to this plant. 40, 35, you get below that and you're going to have some damage if you're slowly walking through the parking lot to your car. So giving it a little protection for going home, then you're set up for better success. And then once again, because of those fungus gnats, when you get it home, keep it a little bit more on the dry side. Don't keep it overly wet or definitely water sitting below there because then you're going to rot the roots on the poinsettia and then you're just going to have more of a fungus gnat problem.
Oh, yes, we
And
talked
that's
about that in the
The
foil.
foil.
Yes, you've talked about
Punch
that.
a hole or
Oh, I
take
don't
it
like
out.
punching a hole, but at least always have another saucer under it because you can't, if somebody like Ella came before you and sliced a hole in the bottom, you're going to need a saucer underneath it to protect your table.
These two, I tell you what.
Yeah. Well, she's got another one that she needs to
Yes,
show.
I wanted to make sure we got, because we've got about 3 minutes
Okay,
left. So.
well, some of you watchers through when we were doing from home, the different shows, this I brought of a cactus of mine that my nephew gave me. It sat for at least 5 years in a styrofoam cup, and I finally planted it up during the pandemic, and it has grown astoundingly and then has formed all these little baby, I should have brought tweezers. I really hate cactus.
Do as she says, not as she does.
And fold a piece
of paper,
newspaper.
yeah. So I just wanted to bring him of how happy
It's a
and
him? I thought it was a her.
okay, we'll call it
Them.
they.
They.
It's doing really well now in a pot. Unfortunately, he has gotten a little bit wobbly, so I did have to put a stake in there. But the amount of little side pups he's formed, he's grown at least a couple inches since I took him out of the styrofoam cup and took the time to put him in soil.
Excellent. Okay. All right, Ella, I think we can get in another show and tell if you've got.
Okay. The last thing is, this is my little hanging little rooter here that I have hanging in my kitchen with Tradescantia. And these were just cuttings off of a plant that I had outside. And you can see that just in less than 2 weeks, I've already gotten some roots. And so as this develops and grows, I can repot it, give it some love, or I can just, make some new cuttings as it expands, and I'm just going to keep it till spring and then maybe put it back in a mixed pot.
I love that. Did you make that?
No, my friend brought it from their Florida vacation.
Very nice.
So
Very cool.
just a cute little hanging jar, which you could probably make with some
That
wire.
looks like the yogurt.
That's why
yogurt.
I asked. I
it
thought,
might.
man.
jar.
I think he bought it at one of those, little farmers markets
Yeah.
while they were down
Yeah.
in Florida a number of years ago. So I've used it for a couple of years, and it's just kind of fun to have hanging in the kitchen.
We've got about 90 seconds. Is there anything that we didn't get to? You've got a bag. Did we get to everything you brought?
This was
We can get it in.
the caladium, and I learned now that pet bedding might be the way to store these. And actually, I do not wash my my bulbs off. And this is one that you want to harvest it as soon as the foliage goes down. If you leave it in the ground too long, they begin to rot.
Noted.
Which I found out.
The hard way, right?
Yeah.
All right,
that
ladies.
was it.
We covered so much ground. Thank you so much for
Excellent.
coming. I really appreciate it. Always a fun time when we've got these two ladies in the building. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions for the gardener panelists, you can send an email to yourgarden@gmail.com, or you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. And we will see you next time. Good night.